Welcome. I'm your host, Space Viking 42, aka Matt Crafton. Today we're going to explore the many ways in which music and the human condition are intertwined. Music has played a central role in human culture throughout history, serving as a form of expression, communication, and entertainment. But music is much more than just a source of pleasure. It has the power to influence our emotions, shape our identities, and even impact our physical and mental health. In this stream, we will delve into the fascinating world of music and its impact on the human experience. From the history of music and its evolution to the ways in which music is used as a tool for social change, we examine a range of topics that showcase the power of music to connect, heal, and inspire. Join us as we embark on a journey into the world of music and discover the ways in which it has shaped and enriched our lives. We have with us today Alyssa Comeau, Masters in Music with a focus on conducting. Here we are. Hello, everybody.
Good morning.
Hello.
As always, we have CP Sketch here with us, and then joining us today is Alyssa Comeau. Hello, hello.
How are you today?
Doing quite fabulous. It's a beautiful Friday morning. How are y'all doing?
Good. Yeah, it's beautiful here too. We just had a little snow. Did you get any snow there, Space Viking?
I didn't notice.
See, Space Viking, this is how you have normal conversations. You start with talking about the weather. You sort of
No, we don't. We don't talk about the weather here. This is weird. What's going on in your brain, CP?
I'm just trying to help you out, dude. I'm just trying to help you out. Showing you how easy it can be.
This is how it's that makes it easier, yes, but I want to know like what really makes people tick. I don't want to care. I don't want to talk about the weather.
We do that in 5 minutes from the weather conversation.
That's true.
It escalates. Just
yes.
Let it escalate.
Well, and for some people, the weather makes them tick, right?
True.
It helps you determine whether you go outside, you stay inside. Are you going to wear a rain jacket or are you going to wear a tank top?
This is...
Some people become meteorologists.
So sometimes it becomes their job to talk about the weather.
I know.
Right?
This is breaking ground. We're going to just dig right into it. Funny how that theme is so easy to just like roll right into.
Yeah. So we're going to break some ground.
So like for me, music is incredibly emotional. Like I generate so much of my stories listening to music that I've listened to. Like an artist would even explain what their song meant, and I'll be like, no, that's not what it means, because I've already formed my own like my own everything.
Yeah, you get into that subjectiveness of music and art. It's always funny when you get this person who's like, this is what the writer intended the song to be, and I'm like, yeah, I know, but I don't feel
not anymore.
It's experiential, you know. It's to each their own. Music's a powerful thing. I agree.
So
I was just thinking this concept of intent versus interpretation, and I think the two collaborate, because even though an artist has an intent behind their music or behind their storytelling, that intent is for them, is for their release. And they have to come at it with the idea that the audience, the listener, is going to interpret based on their perspective and their view. So they really do intermingle that like intent interpretation concept of who's listening, when they're listening, when are you experiencing it. Like you could experience a song for the first time having gone through a recent breakup or the loss of someone, and that will trigger you to hear a song in one route rather than if you hear the song at a different time in your life. You were just married, maybe you just you just started a relationship and everything is new, or you made new friends, or you had this wonderful happy experience. Your interpretation of the song will be different depending on what's going on in your life at the time.
Yeah,
I love that.
There's a big it's a meme now. It's gone around for a while now where it says that when you're happy, you dance to the music, and when you're sad, you understand the lyrics.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's like something that I've always sort of felt. And then like as a storyteller, it's amazing how many scenes I will just like envision while listening to certain music. Like stuff that doesn't even go with it. Like when I was younger, I think I was a preteen. I was like maybe 12, 13. I was reading the Halo novels in the back of a car, listening to Fall Out Boy while reading these books. And even to this day, I've been playing the most recent iteration of the game, Halo Infinite, and I'm like blasting aliens. And in the back of my head, you can just hear Sophomore Slump just playing. Like it's that infectious that it's like I formed a core memory almost with this.
Yeah, that's interesting. How something resonates and sticks with you as the soundtrack of your life, I guess I would say, or specific points in your life. But then also can change, like you were saying, Alyssa, the depending on the point you are emotionally, depending on I'd say the age too. I do the same thing with movies all the time. There's movies that I'm watching consistently throughout life, and it's funny when you get the joke. Like you watched it when you were a kid, you didn't get the adult joke that was in it, or now you get the adult theme, and it's like, oh, this movie was about this. And like I just realized the movie The Labyrinth that I've watched a million times was about loss and grief. This woman had this young woman had lost her mother, and she was using fantasy as a way of escapism. And I'm like, no wonder I like that movie. That's what I did for my childhood, so it resonated.
Also, music is a core memory refresher.
Oh,
this is something I've
yeah.
always found to be super interesting. Think about a song. Ready? We're gonna do this together. We're gonna do this on the fly.
I love it. Okay.
Think about a song that has a deep memory of something specific.
Ooh, it's gonna be rough.
Now think of that song, right? And as you're thinking of the song in your head, right? As you have it and you're hearing the song, what was happening? Can you smell it? Can you smell the moment that song became a core memory? Can you feel the temperature? Do you have a season or a color that comes in mind?
My God.
And like 9 times out of 10, yes, because music has this thing. It's a way that our brain connects the different synapses from our logistical side to our creative side. And then the memory bank, all of them connect when some sort of music is present. So you'll find, like, I have a specific memory of a couple of songs of going like early hiking with a friend of mine, and we did a sunrise hike, and we were just sitting in my car and we were talking, and it was raining, and I can smell the fall. Like as I hear that song, I feel like it's late October and that the leaves are crunchy, and I smell October. Do you guys do you have one of those? And if you do, share it.
Yeah, I would love to share.
So we were talking about that a little bit last week, and it might not. It's connected to music, but it's connected to a little bit more. When I was a kid, I have specific video games that I played, like Super Nintendo games, and now to this day, the music, the atmosphere of the game, in correlation to nature. The beginning of The Legend of Zelda for Super Nintendo starts in the rain, and it's quiet and it's spooky. And I remember I made a connection on a warm summer day that, oh, this is probably what the rain felt like as the game. Like, this is what it might have felt like in reality. I created that atmosphere. So, that being said, on any warm summer day around June, I'm thinking about The Legend of Zelda. Just as a sunny, gleaming lake, I'm thinking of Sonic the Hedgehog. Like, there's certain things that are like making me think of these things. It could be it's music and visual, but yeah. And then you were talking about I was talking about when I went to this party and I listened to Lasers Say It Ain't So, and there was this twins' birthday party, and there were things going on and whatnot. But I do remember, now that you say that, I remember, yeah, it's November. I can fact check certain things, so I know it's probably cold. But yeah, it was cold. and we were in a garage, and I'm starting to remember some of it's probably musty, and I didn't really think about the association of sound and smell in a way until you brought it up. It's cool.
For me, it had to have been. I like to do thematic playlists throughout my life, and this has never really gone away. I was working on my car when I was 16, and I'm like, I'm gonna put on Metallica because that's what you listen to when you're working on a car. And Fuel from Metallica came on, and I remember opening the oil cap and smelling the oil right as that song came on, and it was just so like a perfect moment. It was like, oh, the timing's awesome.
You love the literalness of it.
Yeah, I love it when music does that to me a lot because I think I've programmed my brain to look for that, like when the song is just right. Like there was a moment live streaming too where I can't remember smells because I was just at my computer doing a live stream, and I'm not sure there was any smells to really like lock into. Although I should say for me, smell has never been one of my larger senses. For some reason, I've never had like a very strong sense of smell, and my memory hasn't been incredibly tied to it in the past. Even though everybody's is, I understand that, but like I feel like a lot of my memories, I don't remember them that well in general. Like my memory's not good to begin with. Hey, Agent Giggles, welcome in. Thank you so much for coming in.
Come on in. So you don't have a strong smell. That's interesting to me because I've heard that the olfactory, the smell there is linked. That links you to nostalgic more than anything.
Yeah. And I've typically had not that great of a memory to begin with, so I'm wondering if that's tied to like my lack of memory as well. But I do remember a moment during live streaming where we had been playing this game, and I usually put on some techno or dubstep of some kind while I play games on stream here, and my character had died. I was watching my brother's character, and he like jumped over a ledge, and like the song was already building up to a drop, and right as he landed, it like dropped, and like my brain's already primed to want stuff like that to happen. And I just lost my shit. I was like, holy crap, that's amazing. And it was such an emotional response. I was like crying almost because like I want it to happen all the time, and like when it actually does, it's incredible. I mean, since we're
movies and video games have created that romanticized storytelling aspect for us.
Like choreographed.
Because I relate to that in a lot of different ways. Like there'll be moments in my life where I like stop and I'm like, this is the perfect scene from a movie. Now all I need is the quiet violins playing in the background and the lovely little flute and oboe solo coming over to tell the audience that hope is still there, right? Like we have, I mean, we could go way, way back, right? We could jump into early human civilization where storytelling became a way to pass the time, and storytelling was so critical to continuing traditions and understanding cultures. We as a human species, I think, really enjoy storytelling, and I think we use that in our own lives. And because we're a generation of technology where movies and video games have really kind of influenced our perspectives on daily life, we see our life as if we are that main character and that all the other things are still there. And for those of us who have those moments where the music can come in and you can hear it, it's like really fun and really interesting, and it does help with some core memories for sure.
Got a party popping off over there, Viking. What's going on?
Oops, I forgot to remove one of the features for the podcast. Alyssa, if you wouldn't mind repeating what you just said.
Yeah, every word of it.
Well, no, just the last sentence.
No problem.
Hey, Crisis Cloud, appreciate you redeeming points. That I forgot to turn that off for the podcast, though. Welcome in, Crisis Cloud. Thank you so much.
So you were talking about the soundtrack of your life and being the main character, and
that's just like what we do.
Yeah.
Right? Like we are the main character of our lives, so we often have times where those core memories from music are made are because of the moment that we believe would be the perfect. And like sometimes it's accidental. Like that beat drop when your brother's character jumped off and it was like boo boom and then the beat was there. Like totally random moment, but like beautifully executed and just a wonderful mishap of all things.
I used to speaking to that. I used to do this bizarre fun activity. I'd work in the studio and I would just play cassette tapes or records, just old vintage media while playing VHS tapes, and the sound would be off on the VHS tape. And every once in a while, I'd hope for that perfect moment. And every once in a while, it would create a perfect moment. And I was watching, I don't know if anyone ever saw Short Circuit. It was a movie about a robot, and his name was Johnny Five. And he's in a truck, and they're Steve Gutenberg's like driving him away, and people are chasing him. And I think I was listening to like a punk cover of like "Go Johnny, go go," and like he was running, and it was like Johnny, and I was like, "This fuck, yeah, this is awesome." I was so excited. But yeah, they're real diamonds in the rough. But if you do that, it's just if you're just in your studio working or whatever, it's a phenomenon that every once in a while things collide in just the right way.
So I haven't
thought about that movie in forever, and it's really great to know there's someone else who remembers that film. Oh,
so that's
I love it.
Now we're starting to peel it back. I love this. We're now in the 80s. Let's go further, like 70s.
Yeah, welcome to the arcade. Here we are in the 80s.
Yeah,
we're going back to the 70s. The 70s
back to the 70s. Like every movie had disco in it. Every like Bruce Lee.
Not every movie had disco in the 70s. I love this generalization. He goes, every movie had disco in it. Because when I was watching Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver,
not disco, but
Coppola's Godfather,
you're right. You're right.
Disco in those.
You're right. I did generalize. I generalize a lot. That's part of why I do the disclaimer if I'm not an expert, is because I do a lot of generalizations.
and he knows he wakes me up when he gets talking about movies and stuff. So that's one thing I have a passion for.
But you're right. Like the films of the time. Now that this didn't start until after the 1930s, right? Because in the 1930s is when sound was introduced to film with the jazz singer.
Disco.
But it wasn't until honestly like the 50s and 60s when classic like the music being used for film was inspired by pop tunes. Like you've got Blackboard Jungle, which used Rockin' Around the Clock, which was one of the first pop tunes used as a theme for a movie. And then after that, it becomes pretty widespread that movies are using music of the time to relate to the teens, to relate to the early 20s, 30s people.
So what year was
film music history is really cool.
What year was that introduced roughly the pop song? The 50s.
Blackboard Jungle I think was like 1950.
Blackboard Jungle?
52. Yeah.
1955.
30s.
This is another thing we do live on stream. For this is we research with people if there's something we're not sure about. We got Blackboard Jungle, Glenn Ford, Sidney Poitier.
For fun, it's a black and white movie.
You mean Poitier? Sidney Poitier?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's. I'll help you out with that one.
Nice. So Agent Giggles in the chat here. Is also a writer, and he was talking earlier about how when he writes, he sees it as a movie playing out in his head. And like, I feel like that might be part of the reason why when a writer is helping the production team choose music, he's hearing music that he's listening to recently. So a lot of movies will have music from their time period. But then I feel like there's a lot of it always makes me laugh. It's a movie based in the 70s but made in the 2020s or something like that, right? And then it'll do the most generic song from that time period just to get people to like connect with that time period again. And it's like, no, there was so much other music though. Why are we doing this song again? And this is the 5th movie I've seen with this song because it, is based in that time period.
It's probably cheap to buy. It's probably,
or like, are you ready for some fun facts? Some like movie fun facts. 2001: Space Odyssey. Randall Newton.
Sorry, you're freezing up a little bit there.
Put in classical tunes like Waltz of the Danube. Oh, is it better?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Okay. 2001: Space Odyssey. He was asked to put in some like stand-in tracks for the concept. So he did the Waltz of the Danube, which is a classical, like famous piece. He did Edvard Grieg's the opening that everyone knows, bum 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 bum, right? So all classical music used in this like sci-fi fantasy futuristic film. Newton took the time to write the entire score, and then right before they were going into post-production and they were going to get ready to release the movie with the new soundtrack, Stanley Kubrick was like, "No, I don't like it. We're not using your score. Your score's done." So they used all of the classical music tracks. So the entire score for this like futuristic film is all classical, which is like really interesting that the concept of the movie, which is so out there and is very like introspective, uses classical music. It's interesting.
That's interesting to me too, because if you go back to some of the early cinema before there was audio, a lot of times they'd just be piping in these old standards and classical tracks, someone playing along in the background. So almost in a way, it pays homage to the early cinema, and a lot of those movies were kind of surreal and fantastic or supernatural.
Yeah,
I never really thought of that, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting subject matter. I love seeing how things change throughout time in movies. We could do a whole show on that sometime.
We honestly could.
Seriously, I teach a class called Music Through Movies, where we look at the development of sound into movies, and we start in like the 1880s with the development of moving photography, right? Nickelodeons with the motion picture, and then we go right up to today, and we show examples of the different styles of music that was incorporated during different times. And like, the 50s and 60s, their sci-fi thrillers, including the theremin, so that you could get the like what we know today as like Alien, right? Yeah, so fun, so cool.
So you would know you'd probably have the answer for then why what's the answer? Why did a bunch of 80s kids feel very uncomfortable when people started singing and dancing in movies, and it took years for me to get into musicals? Like, why would that have what culturally happened there? I find that interesting.
Super, especially because musicals have been around since the 40s, right? The 1930s, 1940s, some of the first when sound came out, they were like, "Oh, the jazz singer is a musical. He sings in it." You've got 42nd Street. You've got Wizard of Oz. There are
42nd Street.
42nd Street.
What was that movie about?
It's about 42nd Street, dude.
My guy.
It's about putting on a show. It's like from the perspective of an actress, like a lead actress who, like, technically the lead breaks her ankle and can't do this big giant musical number on Broadway, so the second girl gets put in, and you like follow that story, and you get to see them like choreograph and her relationship with her male co-star, and it's like it's great. It's so much fun.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Check that one out.
Musicals came back in like the 40s, right? And like, so they really brought a lot of musicals into the 40s and 50s to try to bring the country's energy positive post World War II.
Yep. Oh, I see. They're like, people need to cheer up a little bit.
And it continued for a while.
Yes, and like I wonder if 80s. I'm thinking of like Footloose.
Yeah. Oh.
So there was a few like that. There's some that always kind of that snuck by, like you'd see musicals like here and there, and a lot of times they disguise them, I think, as more like music videos, like a flash dance type thing, and more dance centric. What happened is musicals were very popular even up through the 60s. You think of all the stuff. When did Mary Poppins come out? Wasn't that like right before the 70s, like 60s, like that kind of era? But anyway.
Yep. West Side Story.
Yeah. Yep. Unfortunately, what happened to throw a generation, and I found this fascinating. The consensus times that you were talking about that grew up on a lot of these musicals, a lot of these people were starting to reject that because of they grew up with presidential assassination, Vietnam War. They had all this stuff happening to them all the time, and the movies started to reflect a dour tone. That's when you started to get what people are calling like the last filmmakers, your Martin Scorsese's, people talking about, dark and more tormented narratives, vigilantism, people starting to like, let's fight, for ourselves. You get the Death Wish and things like that. And but so that all happens. So then a bunch of kids are born, like myself, and it felt very uncomfortable for the longest time. Even I couldn't watch Disney movies. Like they didn't gel well just based on the family and the music, the way music was introduced. But thankfully, Baz Luhrmann came out at the turn of the century and said, "I'm going to bring it back with Moulin Rouge." And
oh, geez.
Let's do it, and let's do it 110%, and let's make a movie like that's an editing nightmare, but we're gonna do it.
And what a comeback!
And and then now think about that. Like now musicals are they pretty much helped open the door and make them palatable. I mean, Help Me was Matt and Trey from South Park and Cannibal the musical. Putting a little humor in the musical made it. Hey, it's cool. I can watch this. This is edgy and funny.
Yeah.
I also think there's a stigmatism, though. It's like opera, right? Opera, classical music, and Broadway musicals were for the wealthy.
Yeah, that's
true. So you had to be like, you went to this thing, you were in a full suit, you were in like a tux, you would spend a lot of money, you would have to like old days to go to the opera. Horse and carriage would bring you up, and you were part of like the crowd, right? So I would say there was this like 60s, 70s, and 80s is where that like the people born in that time period were, I think, trying to remove themselves from that stigmatism. And so because of I also think there's a lot of stuff politically, like you were saying, that's involved in there. I'm thinking about movies like Philadelphia, where the concept of like AIDS and like the fear of interacting with gay men, and this like weird, ridiculous generalization that all men in theater are gay, which like isn't true. I think there was a lot of stigmatization around those, and so I think people were avoiding them because of that.
And there was also
eventually it comes out as we're modernizing it. We're removing the generalizations and the stereotypes, and then people are like, oh, I can be a dude, like a manly man, and I can really love West Side Story or Moulin Rouge or Phantom of the Opera, right? I think that starts to separate in the 90s with Rent and Jonathan Larson.
As a sci-fi fan, what got me into musicals was Repo the Genetic Opera. I didn't think I also thought that musicals just weren't for me. And then I saw that one and I'm like, wait a minute, this is fun. Why am I avoiding these? Like, this is actually really fun.
And now you have like Hamilton.
Yeah, which is a masterpiece.
Which is beautiful. He literally quotes all of the critical beats and raps from the 70s and 80s.
Oh yeah. I can see that. So I'm gonna get a little bit away from movies here, so if you have anything else you want to touch on. No, really. I love this this subject, so I wanna allow room.
Yeah, we should definitely devote like a larger coming soon, movie and music.
Coming soon.
If you'd like to talk about that in the future, that'd be really fun.
I feel like musicals, they're afraid to do like that. The one thing I do want to touch on before we go on to another subject is that since the Cats debacle, I haven't seen a lot of producers wanting to do musicals since that one.
Stuff's just quality control is just it's just at an all-time low.
It got out of hand.
It's just I'll tell you what, not to get back on movies, but this is the first time where I finally realized in my life I loved movies and shows, and I'm just like, I think I'm done. I think I'm just gonna make my own thing. I've seen enough of the stories because, especially with the content being spun out within a genre for so long, like say a Star Wars, like how much of that can I really deal with, even if I like it and commit to
and commit to? That's a big one for me. Like I don't have the time.
Some of it's, and like the idea that some of it's good and some of it's bad. It's like I'd like to go out for like one really good meal every once in a while instead of just eating a bunch of crap dumped onto me all the time and getting sick and yeah, it's just it's a lot there. Side subject was I going with that, huh?
I know. I'm not sure, CP. Do you want me to just throw in another wrench into it?
Sure.
Okay. We are officially in the deep dig now, which is why I'm breaching another subject. We're going really deep into it. Let's start with the hard question. I want to word it correctly. Why? Yeah, the last couple times I did this to CP, he had like a brain rewriting moment. That's what it looked like from my end, anyway.
I just get so nervous when someone's like, "All right, here's the hard question. All right, let me think about how I'm gonna say it." It's like, dude, what are you about to say, dude?
Yep.
So
I was like, oh God, I hope I'm ready.
So can music be, I just want to word it correctly so it's not such a hard hit. Can music be used as a therapeutic tool to help people cope with mental health challenges? This is something that
100%.
I have personally experienced where like if it weren't for music, I don't think I'd be here today. Like that's how deep this hits me of like, without music, I definitely would not have stuck around.
I love that that's a question because it's a super easy answer. Yes, and there's actually a degree route where when you're going to school for music, you can choose between music ed, music performance, music business, and then of course a couple of other things like composition and theory and history. And then there's this beautiful little sidetrack called music therapy.
Aww.
And it actually exists where people go and they do like 2 to 3 years of work in researching how to use music to help people of different states, standards, like wherever they are, right? So a really cool, easy activity is like any of the mindfulness videos that you notice these days. All of those mindfulness 5 to 10 minutes, they have music, and the music in the background has a drone, and the drone is a specific pitch. And supposedly that pitch is supposed to resonate at the cellular level to calm you.
Oh my God, we're getting some biology in here too.
Yes,
that's cool.
It's crazy actually. I have friends who have done it and writing, people who write lyrics and write music can use that as therapy going through tough times and they get all their stuff out. I've written lyrics of things that are really difficult, of times that I've gone through, and just putting it out in paper and seeing it helps me work through the thing, right? People play music as therapy. So I'm a rage runner. When I'm really angry and I need to like burn steam, I run. I literally go for like a 2-mile run.
Ooh.
I've also, when I am really, really, really upset and like emotional, I sad play piano.
Oh yeah.
I just let whatever thing comes through me. So music is totally a therapy, and there are actual degrees that help people. Fun side note about it: there was a documentary that came out years ago. I don't remember what it's called, which is not helpful at all. But the concept was that there was this group of people who were putting together little MP3 players of music for people in nursing homes and like hospitals for people with dementia and Alzheimer's. And if you play the music to them, they actually become lucid and can tell you stories of their lives because of how deep-seated music is. So these family members were getting lucid moments with their loved ones by playing big band era swing. And they'd be like, oh, me and my husband Johnny used to swing dance to the Glenn Miller band in South Park. And it like absolutely beautifully amazing. And this was a whole project trying to collect funds to provide this sort of music therapy. And I don't know where it went, and I don't know the name of the documentary, but it's totally worth the find if we can find it.
So
that's really cool.
I had this happen. That's why I'm so amazed by this story, because I actually had this happen to me. When my father passed away, I didn't really grieve for like a whole 2 years after. I've said this a couple times on the podcast, so I won't get into that. But the main, how this connects to our subject this time is that it wasn't until 2 years after, really, really hard day at work. I was basically dead to the world. I was like, nope, shutting down. I'm going home. And on the drive home, I just put on a random playlist. I'm like, oh, let's listen to some stuff from my past. Why not? And Welcome to the Black Parade came on. And I just broke down on the way home. Like, it was like I suddenly had all the grief all at once. And I'm like, why? Why now? Why this song? Why? Because of this song. And like, I remember like saying through my tears, like, why? Like, why this? And it was because of the lucidity of it. Like, it brought me right into the emotion that my brain was trying to avoid, but needed at the same time. That's brilliant. That like, now I have a science behind why that happened. So thank you so much for explaining that. That's insane that there is a science that they've actually looked into it that far, because there's a lot of things in science that they don't bother to look into it because it seems hokey or it seems like too out there. And I love that there's actually something you can point at and go, this does this to the brain. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Do you think, could it be was the song specific to memory, or was it just the emotion of it, like that?
Some of it was like, oh, Alyssa's computer just restarted. So
she's perpetually frozen in thought for a minute.
Yeah.
Until she returns.
So I'll put you as the focus for now until that fixes.
For God's sakes, here we go. Now you've done it. You've put
CP
CP
sketch.
as the focus.
CP sketch in the house.
But I do like that cellular pitch, like to make happy or sad. Yeah, I want to put. That's interesting. I want to put some really bad stuff in the background of my gloom composition.
You could have I do have terrible. There's a playlist I have that it's essentially a make happy sad playlist. It's like a somber, like a gloom, it'd be like a gloom playlist, I guess you could say. I'm so coming in with the cat. The thing that gets me, like, to answer your question, it was that he's talking about his father in the song in such a somber and respectful way. In like a missing you, but also recognizing that like it's okay to miss you kind of thing. Oh, she's on her phone now.
On my phone now.
Nice.
Whatever works.
Okay.
I like you're talking about like cellular pitch, or like how they put things into make it happy or sad. Yeah, I want to definitely do some more research into that. I love that kind of stuff. One of my favorite movies was favorite movies post 2000 would be No Country for Old Men, and it's a very minimal score, but they used a lot of like those like Buddhist like little singing bowls and things like that to create tension. They pitched one out to a refrigerator in the background of a scene, and it's like even with the refrigerator for a while, but then it comes up and down a little bit, and then it overrides the sound of it. And it's just like very minimal things that they do to create tension in that movie that I find fascinating. So yeah, that's a cool subject I'd like to learn more about in the future.
The human brain, the way it reacts to music, like do you feel like, and I'm asking both of you just as this is contemplating, so how do you feel like it helps you process grief, but like trauma and other difficult emotions, like throughout history and across cultures even, like it has been used as almost like a medicine throughout all cultures and all people to help process trauma and grief? Because I know there's how poetry fits in with music, and there's so many poems that are about wars and about overcoming like the aftermath of a war, like Flanders Fields comes to mind, and how musical that poem almost is. And it's like now you're processing the grief of an entire nation through song. Yep.
Okay, so there are actually two routes that I want to go with this. The first route is about the like biological side of music. So when you scientifically break down music to what it is, it's sound waves, and sound waves are natural. They are part of the universe. They're part of space. Everything has a hum. Everything has a pitch, and that's super cool and super interesting. And because of that, there are certain pitches that people can resonate to a little bit more than others, which I find this like it's the concept that a lot of Buddhists use with their singing bowls is that the humming and the vibrations of the bowls can connect us all in this like synergy, this movement of vibration, right? So there's that aspect of like the scientific, the waves are perfect. And if you cut the wave in half, so if you pick a pitch like do, and we cut it in half, the next pitch you get is that note an octave higher. And then you cut it in half again, and then you get the fifth and then the fourth. And there's this like beautiful, symmetric, mathematical thing with sound that is way above my pay grade, quite frankly. But it's super cool and absolutely beautiful to research. And then if we start talking about how cultures and humans have used music as a healing tool, it's all over the place. When you go and you get a massage, there's music in the background.
Yep.
When you are at a doctor's office, there's music in the background. Music is a way to reduce anxiety, to calm the soul, relax. It's like music is used for a lot of different things. And then there's this twist, there's this turn in the 1800s where music becomes nationalistic. And in the 1800s, music is being used to provide vigor and support of a country's political group or a country's purpose.
Yep.
The national anthem.
Actually goes right into another question that I had. That's
so
great.
Like every country has one. So actually, I wrote this note down before we started talking about this composer, Shostakovich. Shostakovich was imprisoned by the USSR and was being forced to write nationalistic Russian music to like support the cause.
Oh, forced.
And this is during the time where he's Jewish and he is being persecuted and his family is being, they're being captured and killed and murdered. He secretly, and it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. The music he was writing convinced the USSR that the music was nationalistic, but when you listen to it, you can hear the depths of his despair. And you can hear him trying to support a nation of people being oppressed and murdered.
That explains so much about why the music sounds the way it does. I never actually thought that deep into it, but I was like, why are these anthems so like haunting, whereas others are more like happy and like victorious sounding? Like this one sounds like somber and like I don't know how else to describe it, kind of like a down to earth, like a human feeling to it. I'm like, that's different. That doesn't sound as well,
It's
nationalistic.
because of what was going on when they were written, or it's because of the underlying story of what is happening. Like when you think about the national anthem, right? People sing it at baseball games, you hear it all the time. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming?
Yeah.
Beautiful poetry describing a moment where, is it John Smith? I think his name is John. I think it's John Smith. Because Francis Scott Key wrote the poems and John Smith wrote the music.
Yeah.
Is sitting captured in a ship looking at DC being basically taken out by cannons. And as the ends of twilight twinkle away and dawn's early light shows, he sees that flag. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave?
Yeah.
Right. So the music is all, and like, I think the national anthem should be rewritten because it's not as, I think, powerful as it could be if the music was written different. But yeah, that's it. Like nationalism and nationalistic feels or groups of nations and groups of people. Think about different cultures. Different cultures have music that represent different things. How passionate people get in different, religious ceremonies with the music that is inspiring them and moving them to their deity, right?
Oh yeah. That gets into. Sorry, go ahead, CP.
What year was the anthem written? We were just speaking about the Russian anthem, roughly.
So technically Shostakovich's music is not the Russian national anthem. It's just Shostakovich's music during that time period.
Just during that period.
And I don't remember the decade specifically.
Dmitri?
Yep.
All right. So here's we're gonna go into another section of the deep dive where we do some research together.
Sure.
But he has this chamber winds piece that when I heard it, I cried because it was like you could feel his longing for his people. Mm-hmm. You can feel his like fight to stay alive for his family.
How roughly would you spell that composer's name?
I got it right here on the screen.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And you don't have to put her through that.
Yeah. I was gonna say I wrote it down. I don't think it's right, but Shostakovich.
Correct.
Boom.
Nice.
Hard time with this language.
So this is interesting that this came up. I just started playing a game called Atomic Heart. It is a alternate history where the Soviet Union was the most powerful group in World War II and essentially like won World War II, but didn't stop there. Like they kept going and expanding, and the USSR is massive in this story. And in it, the music is designed to sound like music from the Soviet Union from that era, but it's now like, I guess it takes place in like a 1995, like an alternate history 1995. I don't think the years are, at least I haven't seen the year put somewhere, but it sounds like it's new music that was never got written because the Soviet Union fell. So the composers working on this game had to dig really deep to like, how do we write new music in this style?
Yeah. Actually, cool little thing. I had just done this with my 7th grade music class. We did a world music unit where I had them each pick an instrument from around the world. And one of the kids picked the balalika, which is it looks like a Dorito. I love it. It's my favorite.
Wait, it actually looks like a Dorito?
Instrument. Yep. So like the bottom of it is like a triangle.
It's right here.
No. It's like, oh, wait, what is it? What's it called?
Balalika. If you listen to ensembles of that instrument, my kids were like, it sounds Russian. And I'm like, it's a Russian instrument. So
that's so cool looking. Oh my goodness.
Why do you have that? Why do you think it sounds Russian? They're like, I don't know. I'm like, have you ever seen a movie or a video game with this in it? And they're like, probably. And I was like, that's why. This is a cultural instrument from Russia that anytime something is happening in Russia, they use music, traditional folk music from Russia. So yeah, it is Russian.
Oh my God, it's massive.
Right. And they have different sizes because they have like, they have the soprano one.
Massive, wicked.
That is a giant. guitar.
Do they have a bass one?
That
The big
dude's
one
like,
is
I'm gonna make a guitar pick out of my guitar.
That's not a bass. That's not a.
Yes.
That's not a bass one, correct? Like that's a regular one.
I can't see. I can't tell. I
Oh,
just
right.
see my face.
Okay, so it's all the way down to his like. It's got a stand. Like that's how big it is. Like
It's
it's
it
got
could
like
be
a
a bass.
it's got like a kickstand on it.
Is it a dad got guitar or a mom guitar?
Probably a grandpa.
Grandpa's guitars. I can't do that. I can't do that
Grandpa.
accent. Oh god, in Metalocalypse when they were like grandpa's guitars. Yeah, wow. That
Oh,
is so interesting.
Absolutely,
Right.
just put something in the chat. It's a sad history of musicians being enslaved. So I want to speak to that just for a
Yeah.
second. And we were talking about Boz Lerman earlier. So I watched Boz Lerman's Elvis last week, and so I never had any type of connection or love for Elvis. I always associated Elvis with something different in my head. Something like I don't know, just more good old boy country. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I thought of it probably more as like a more national
Yeah.
listening for some reason. I don't know why, but I did. Like he's a piece of Americana. He must be this and that. But when I watched that movie, I I never given any interest, and a lot of it's how
Right.
the filmmaker put it together. But I was like, wow, what a tragic misfit story. I mean, this guy he was quite different for what I thought he was, and then he had an unfortunate legacy, and I was like, wow, this it's interesting. And now I'm walking around and I keep singing this Elvis song in my head, and I emotionally connecting to it, and it's just a weird feeling after all these years to be connected to something that's been part of the world that I've never been able to connect to, but then through someone's film, I don't know.
Well, the problem is there's a lot we don't know, right?
Yeah.
So any person who's a public figure, you're getting a brand. You are seeing them selling themselves. And that brand oftentimes is led by the public or by a producer or by, an agent. So the stories behind a lot of these artists are things, they're coming out with a lot. The Elton John, the Bohemian Rhapsody one about Freddie Mercury. We've got the Elvis one, the Ray Charles. Like they have all of these new docu movies coming out to really show you how these artists, like the truth behind their growth into music, like fame, and how a lot of the times it's sad and unfortunate the route that they take, or you never really get to see them as the true artist that they are.
Yeah,
it's very true.
And
lady, was it?
Who's to say at this point that music's we're talking about it changing all the time as we get older and as we experience it in different emotional levels. It's very easy to say that music can change for the times too, like the view of Elvis and what he was then versus what he could be now might be completely changed, and then the music then gets recontextualized and becomes a completely different message for the next 10-20 years until someone flips it.
A really great current example of that is Sam Smith. He's all over the news right now because of his awards ceremony performance, and how like when you watch early videos of him as who he is performing, it's very low key, and now everything is like super big and flashy and wild, and it makes me wonder, like, is this who he actually is, or is this who they want him to be?
Yeah. Is he now comfortable to the point where he's starting to be himself, or is he just being like, hey, you'd probably do better if you did this?
Or like a Lady Gaga. Have you seen early singing tapes of Lady Gaga? Her like in bars with piano and guitar, totally different than like Poker Face and all of her like crazy like stylistic changes and things. It's very interesting.
Well, you just hit me personally with something like discovery moment. We need that alert or something. Like, we found something in the hole. You know, like, let's go find.
Just
So
Vuvuzela just starts playing. It's like mind blown.
I'm just gonna say, we talked about the Baz Luhrmann film and how it changed things, right? And how I finally am like, Elvis is all right now, maybe, right? Because a movie showed me a certain way. Right? You just talked about Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga to me was like, when she came out, I was like, it's just a pop star, like getting a lot of attention, and the way that it felt constructed and it felt right because it felt like part of the system. And not that she's not talented, but she was marketed well. And I never really, at the age she came out, I was just like, yeah, I don't really care too much. But when I saw the remake of A Star Is Born, and I watched her in a movie, and I watched her singing that, and the song she did, the Shallow, like, I think it's just one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. And yeah, it's weird now. I'm like, yeah, now I'm a fan now. I'm cool. She was just doing that pop stuff as a side project. She's got a lot of talent, you know, and I've recontextualized it based on the information I was given.
Lady,
so if you make a movie, you're gonna win this guy over because I'm probably a friggin' idiot, I guess. Now I gotta read more.
I think the polite term is
the Beatles.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
one of the rare music humans who does not like the Beatles. I do not like the Beatles. And I get made fun of in like music circles all the time. And I ask people, I'm like, well, why do you like the Beatles? Well, they were revolutionary and their music's great. Okay, yeah, they're super talented. They are, they started a music revolution, I guess, the boy band, right? The first real like boy band.
Yeah, the first core pop group. You had Elvis being the icon and them being the NSYNC equivalent, I guess.
Exactly. All right. Now, listen to the lyrics of some of their songs and then tell me what you think. Because there's a couple of their tunes where he literally talks about, like, they talk about going up to a woman's door and, like, shooting her in the head.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what makes this music super great? Is it the lyrics or is it the content? Which then leads down to, like, a separate route that I also have noted here. So I have a question for you guys. Because we're talking about music and the human condition, right?
Yeah.
So knowing that humans are imperfect and flawed, would you support a musical artist if they supported things that were like hateful?
No, I don't. That's one thing that I do, and
Here we go.
That's one of the things that I do in this world is that once I meet my heroes, and they turn out to be villains, I go, oh, so I don't want them to have money, because that's the only thing that really gives people power in this world. And if someone's proven to be a bad person, I'm not going to give them any more power. Back on the PC.
Yeah, that's a heavy question.
It's difficult because Hogwarts Legacy came out, for instance, and that's one thing.
And are you playing it? Are you playing it?
No, I don't. The thing is, I don't love Harry Potter enough to have a weapon in that fight. Like, it's very easy for me to say, oh, this game's proving to be a problem in social circles. I don't need to play it. But people who love it and absolutely want to play it and are enjoying it, they have something to, like, they can either choose to support it or choose not to. Like, for me, like, I'm not supporting it because I'm not really big into that world. But the same thing's happening
you
with
heard it here, folks. It's only because he doesn't like Harry Potter.
Well, no, the thing is
canceled.
But this is back with this is back in when all this stuff first came out with J.K. Rowling. I said, oh, she's like that. She is the only person in charge of her Twitter account, and she said these things. Okay, not going to support anything from her anymore. And now years later, this game comes out, and I'm like, I've already done that. I've already decided not to, right? Like, years ago. And then, but the thing is about it is that the fight.
You did it.
So what did you miss from that, Alyssa?
Nothing. I heard it all. It's
okay.
Beautiful.
It's basically it's just about how you can make the choice to not support them. You can still have favorites. Like, I love Prisoner of Azkaban, but that's because that book in particular probably didn't have a lot of those themes in it that these people are talking about. Like, that was very much about getting Sirius Black out of prison, I believe. It's like that. Most of that book was that, and that character just didn't have that many problematic aspects to them.
I was surprised. I mean, honestly, I was surprised. The whole thing. I don't follow this woman's life. I have a tendency not to. I mean, people are inspirations to me, not idols.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I have a hard time finding heroes anyway. You know, it's just me. You know me. I'm a little distrustful just in general, and so yeah, I figure people are capable of doing bad stuff. It's when people are consistent, I think, and current. It's what makes it hard. Like, yeah, Harry Potter was a cool thing, but I mean, really, it was, you know, if you wanted to get into it, it was just taking Dungeons and Dragons and just making a story around it and changing a few names. It's not massively creative, but she was, you know, lightning in a bottle. She found it at the right place in the right time. I always thought she was progressive. You know, I thought like Dumbledore was a gay wizard, right? Wasn't that like openly said? I mean, I guess maybe that was a thing. Maybe she just said that like later on, but I don't know if there was any context to prove that throughout the writing or any nods. But yeah, when she was saying all this other negative stuff, I was like, oh, this
well, it was that
pretty crazy all of a sudden, and
that she directly came out on Twitter and said things like, "Oh yeah, the goblins are. That's an allegory for the Jews." Like, she directly said that, like, on Twitter. Yeah.
I mean, I try not to like even give this world as much credit as it deserves.
She didn't even realize what she was saying because she was
I mean, I get it. I mean, it's kind of on the nose. George Lucas did it too. Like, they're awful.
Yeah.
Like these stereotypical characters. Yeah, it's historically.
But when it comes to your actual question, when it comes to music, the stuff about Lady Gaga did change the way that I absorbed her music. Like, I no longer wanted that production company to want any money. So I took all of her music off of all my playlists on Spotify because I know that boosts it. I took all of the music. Like, I'm waiting for her to like start her own label or something so I can support her directly. But like, the labels that those songs were made from that manipulated her and like basically enslaved her, I don't want to support that sort of that behavior. So I don't want them to have money.
What happened there? But I don't know this story.
Well, that's what we were kind of touching on a little bit with Lady Gaga. Is her previous music before she got signed was so different, and they basically forced her to be a pop star. They said, "Oh, if you want to work with us, you have to write the music we want you to write." And she, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is all hearsay and like all I read was like the headlines, but it's my understanding that she didn't read the fine print on some contracts, and they basically tied her, like they basically locked her up with the contract.
Most artists deal with that, actually.
Yeah.
Kesha, Taylor Swift.
Yep, I heard about Kesha.
Like,
yep.
Once you get signed by a production company, like a company that's going to produce all of your music and your album, you are basically at the whim of whatever they want. They are the ones who determine what's going to make you successful a lot of the times. Now, there are some who are more supportive, but it's very common. It happens all the time. Some people come out from it and some people don't. I mean, we all heard about Taylor Swift's battle with her,
was it Ticketmaster?
Agent. Britney Spears had one, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah. That's a whole different thing.
Britney Spears, following her on social media has been really cool though, to see how she's just like, fuck it, I'm gonna enjoy my life. Screw all that shit that happened. I love watching her like transformation. So Abso's bringing up some pretty good stuff of like J.K. Rowling just had a serious case of foot and mouth. That's a really good way to wrap that up, honestly. She just had a really bad case of foot and mouth where she should have just not said anything, because art is subjective and you can interpret your book. Like, let's say for like for whatever reason, I release my novel and it gets a lot of hate back for reasons that I didn't even intend. Like this character sounds like this, and this character's, and like, well, those are all valid opinions, unfortunately, because it's art. Like, you guys are interpreting it the way that your brain, like, if you've programmed your own brain to just see everything as racist, then you're gonna see racism everywhere.
Cutting those grooves, man, digging those channels.
Yeah, exactly. Digging those channels.
Right.
That's an I have to write that down. That's perfect. But
You won't forget it. It'll be in book 3 of the Dreamers Arcade.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyway, Abso went on to say that it's common in the music industry, agreeing with Alyssa that happens all the time.
Yeah, Abso, not to say names, she has a friend who was a singer-songwriter and lost all her songs like right when she started out in life, but she became a huge children's star host. That's enough. So it worked out. For her. But I think everybody can get taken advantage of. I'm glad the system is changing where like people can do a lot more stuff on their own. You don't have to work so much with the studio aspect of it. We have the technology more accessible, but yeah, if you want to get your stuff out there, you're still at the mercy when say you look at the numbers of one of Rihanna's albums, and when it launches, they'll spend like 500 million just in promotion, just so she's on every social media page everywhere when you're clicking it, because that's how you're going to find it and get it, and it's going to be very quick that it's all going to happen. And unless you have those people funneling the money there, then yeah, you can get lost.
Wow.
So to my question, here's the perfect example. So in the 1800s, there was this composer, Richard Wagner, which as a film buff, you should know Wagner. Wagner was a composer who wrote music, and he wrote a lot of opera music, and he invented the leitmotif. He invented the Star Wars, each character in place has a theme concept.
Leitmotif?
Yeah, leitmotif. A leitmotif is a theme given to a person, place, or thing. So Star Wars is my best example.
Oh my god.
You've got the
Luke
March.
and Leia. Yeah,
I have
Luke and Leia's theme, the Force theme. Like there are themes throughout that are consistent through the entire saga, right?
Yeah.
That is a leitmotif, and he invented it when he was writing music for operas. Wagner also wrote like really incredible orchestral scores, small ensemble pieces. Wagner is also anti-Semitic.
Oh.
Damn. So there's been a lot of talk in the classical music world about, do you do his music or do we like cancel him, right? So the idea is, are you going to, like, how do you find the boundary of someone who might have beliefs that are different or horrible beliefs that we don't agree with at all, right?
Yeah.
But someone who has literally is considered the birth of film music.
Yeah.
And what is that boundary of showcasing all of the great things he did without glorifying who he is? And you have to find that boundary, and that's very difficult in music because there are so many people who are like that. Percy Grainger, a really, really great arranger who wrote music for band and for choruses. He said a lot of racy things in his time period in Australia and New Zealand. So it's hard. It's like you want to like support the art and the genius that they were without supporting the beliefs that they have. And
I think
what's going on?
I think it's fair to say that if you support a person's art, you are not supporting their views. I think that feels pretty empirically true. But at the same time, if you on a personal level, I don't think anyone can vilify you for liking someone's art because you're not actually supporting their views by supporting their art. But for you on a personal level, if it feels really shitty to support that person because of their views, then that's a personal choice. Like if you don't want to support them, then don't support them.
Absa wants to be the third guest, and
Apso is more than welcome to be a third guest.
I have to read. There's supporting the artist, but also still need to recognize the impact they might have. Great example is when some some music education methodologies, which are still used today, were a product of Nazi Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
or Codally method, music education.
Yeah, that's
to indoctrinate the Hitler Youth, and that's still used
yeah.
today and
See,
still taught in schools.
That's when we get into like Christian Bale, for instance. So Christian Bale was found to be a wife beater, right? He was found to be abusing his family, abusing his coworkers, right? But I don't think there's a way for his work to be manipulating other people to become wife beaters. You know, like that's the example I'd use. There are artists out there that are trying to manipulate society to be more like they would prefer. And I think that's also would base, if you are an easily manipulated individual, then that work is going to rub off on you in that way.
Yeah, and there's also separating what I do is try to separate the artist from the art a lot, because I have to deal with that a lot with movies. I'm not going to stop watching Lethal Weapon, even though I don't like Mel Gibson at all, but I don't hang out with Mel Gibson. And I can do that. Like, especially, I grew up watching a lot of 80s wrestlers. None of those guys were politically correct. They're horrible people.
Yeah.
Most of them, sorry guys, but there still doesn't mean they didn't have an impact. I just have to know the difference. If I can't perpetuate something that's horrible. I can, but I choose not to. But yeah, it's especially when the artist is not even alive. What do you?
Where's the money going? I mean, if we go back to like, do we want to give them more power?
Why do we not want to fund J.K. Rowling? Do we think she's creating a whole?
She's directly funding anti-trans.
So there you go. So that's why. So that goes beyond the persons. I guess we could call them demons. Whatever you want to call them, or shortcomings where they have. Christian Bale obviously has problems with rage in a relationship, but he's not like creating a whole army of people like, everybody, let's all beat women.
Yeah.
Maybe by example, like default, there's a default, but it's hard sometimes in certain things.
Well, like I'm not sure about, like, I do want to bring it back to the music aspect too. Like, I don't know that many musicians that are problematic. I don't know the actual, like, that's another one that's easy for me because like I could just stop listening to the music.
I would just say most of them.
Well, most of them either are involved with problematic situations with the companies they work with, or they themselves are problematic. Yeah. It's like when it's the company they're working with, you just stop giving that company money, and then you wait for them to do their own solo thing, and you fully support that.
Woodstock 99 messed me up hardcore.
Oh yeah.
Have you seen that documentary?
Abso is in the chat. Woodstock 99.
No idea. Yeah. So just
I don't have an idea at all. Educate me, please.
So it was at the perfect age. I knew what happened with the event. I knew people that had gone there. I knew it was insane that it all caught fire at the end. So what it's most known for is like when Red Hot Chili Peppers started playing Fire, they burned the fucking place down. And it was a riot. It was crazy. But if you watch the documentary that I had the Woodstock 99 concert DVD that had like one song from a million different people. And I used to drink with my friends, mainly a bunch of guys, and watch that thing all the time. And now that I look back onto it and what the content was, along with everything else was being promoted, it was 100% selling toxic masculinity, and it was packaging it in a way and selling it so you'd watch it over and over and over and brainwash yourself. And I wonder why I had some pretty fucked up years around that time and had to go into a lot of therapy, because I just happened to fit into this way, into this genre and time of music where I was angsty enough, and it made me even more messed up. And then to know the assaults that were happening alongside, and to know that I paid for something and I was watching something, and it was just like it's shattering. So watch the documentary Space Viking if you want to learn toxic masculinity at the turn of the century and how it was being sold to men, like just that frat boy, jackass kind of culture that carried throughout. And that was the end. I think that was the end of it. Like when you go through and you end it early 2000s, Jackass, Chappelle Show, all that stuff, like they started to be like, wait a minute. And I think that's when I guess we'd say we started to get more woke because we started to step back and look at the toxicness of 20 years ago. But yeah, I like that you brought that up. What'd you think of it? Fun time?
I like
Fun
holy
time.
snap. That documentary was wild. Mind blowing. I've seen mob mentality, and to see it so encouraged by artists, like I already didn't like the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
But then when in the documentary, when they come backstage before their last song, and the creators of the event are like, bro, we need you to settle them out, it's getting bad, and instead they go out and freaking sing Fire and like incite a riot, I was like, yep, you're done. I knew I didn't like you for a reason. I knew it.
When it's hard because they're like the true Gen Xers too, so it's like that's part of their script. It's like, let's destroy the system because like there's a reason that Gen X, I understand, because it's like they were raised by that 70s darkness to reject the system. Like, we're not consensus anymore, we're going the other way. And so I got stuck between on the weird end of everything. And yeah, it's something.
It's wild. And that's like, honestly, it proves the power of music. My parents were very concerned about the music that we listened to as kids, and they were so for context, I grew up in a very Christian religious home. My parents we couldn't watch Harry Potter because my dad read the books and he had done some research on it and was like, I just don't think you're adult enough to handle what some of these could be yet, so we're not going to let you, just not in my house, was kind of their rule. They monitored the music that we listened to, they monitored the movies. And my dad always said, he goes, why do you think there are national anthems? Why do you think mob mentality exists? He goes, music is a motivator. It can drive people to do things that you wouldn't do. But if you're in a group of 150 people and the music is telling you to like rage, you might rage.
Yeah.
Or if like, you just be very aware. And I love my parents to death, and it's one of the things I take is like, as your kids are growing up, making sure that they are mature enough to handle some of those things before you throw them to the wolves, because music can manipulate and music is dangerous. And you think about how
Example
music can
here.
get people into cults, right?
Yep.
Yeah, no, I say that's very true, because on the other end of that spectrum, I always thought that was a bit extreme. You know, like what you said, like, oh, parents don't let you, because Abso had the same thing. She couldn't watch certain videos and certain movies. Now, in my house, there was no God and no anything. It was just my dad just anything goes. They were taking me to watch Predator at 8 years old in the movie theater, and like, you know, like I was watching, I could rent rated R movies by myself because they said I could at the store. Like, you could put your kid's name down, like you could be 12 years old. Yeah, you can rent rated R movies. It's cool with me. You know, so it's free range. I watched whatever I wanted, listened to whatever I wanted. But I don't know. I always wonder if it was me or the music, you know, like what, you never know. Like what, it is a driving force, but it did take me down some places. Maybe they should have not. And the funny thing is, he prides himself too. Yeah, when I was, yeah, I probably shouldn't have. You're 16 years old. You go to like white zombie concerts by yourself and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of cool though. In hindsight, you're kind of a cool dad, but I don't know what it did. Like, and
parenting is hard. I think parenting is a tough thing, but I think it's, you know, you do the best with what you can and what you think. And my parents were always of the mindset that, you know, teens can't drink, teens can't vote, teens can't drive a car, operate heavy machinery. The kind of thing is like, your chemicals are firing, you're irrational. The idea was like, oh, should you be prepared? Are you capable of making decisions that are going to benefit you in the future today? And they were like, nope. And that's a great choice. They're a great choice for my family.
Yeah.
Because we could have gone down some dark routes. And I mean, as we got older, my brother started listening to metal music in high school and got into like the Slipknot, Lamb of God, that kind of music. And my dad was concerned, and he just pulled my brother aside and he goes, "Why you listen to this music? Can you tell me about it?" And he's like, "Well, it's like an outlet. It like takes the rage that I feel and puts it somewhere where I'm not damaging anybody else." And he goes, "But think about the lyrics. Are the lyrics going to damage you later?" And that was a game changer for my brother. My brother was like, "Oh, maybe I should consider the things that I'm listening to so that I don't rabbit hole potentially, because it's possible, right?
Yep.
There's always that potential that it could." And then as we got older, my dad we watch movies together as adults with curse words and sex scenes and stuff, but because we're all adults and our brains are fully formed and we can make logical reasoning, it's different. I don't know. And I think music is just very powerful. Music
It's still not fun when the romance scene comes on when I'm watching it with my parents, even at this age. I'm like,
Yeah.
Like,
So
I hope this is light.
I will not watch Game of Thrones with my dad. Nope.
Yeah, I couldn't even
you
imagine.
touched on something
Right,
very
it's like-
interesting. When it comes to the brain not being fully formed, I've had to do a lot of. It's so hard to rewrite your brain when you're an adult after it's already been sort of formed in a way that doesn't really work. Like the past 6 years for me have been all rewriting like shit that I thought was true about myself, about the world around me, that was formed primarily because I was very impressionable as a teen, and like the media would feed me something, or the book I was reading would feed me something, and it would become truth, but it'd be all subconscious truth. So it made like these past 6 years of like meditation and intense introspection actually like almost walking through a swamp. Whereas if I had just allowed my brain to form more in a healthy way when I was a teen, but then again, I like my parents were great, but they were a little bit absent. They basically would just throw me into a corner and go, "Hey, be quiet, do your thing. We don't care what you do," right? And that allowed me to absorb whatever I wanted. I mean, I'm not meaning to make it sound like I was a awful teen. I was actually like probably kind of goody two shoes when it comes to a lot of people you hear about. But it definitely made me like.
I bet you're a sweet boy.
Well, that's the thing. It wasn't until my late 20s that I had a rebellious phase. I was like, what's all the hubbub about? I've been trying doing it the right way and it's not working. So let's try doing it the wrong way. Or like for
nice guys finish last, my ass.
And then about
Matt's gonna get out there and do it.
Here's the thing: a year of that, and I was like, okay, no, I was doing it the right way. We're gonna go back. And that was when the rewriting started. When I was realizing, interestingly, it was around the same time my dad passed away. So I had this like catalyst as well of like, oh shit, death is real. Like I gotta. I guess I should see how my path is gonna go and like what my choices actually mean.
Inconveniences the rest of the world. Once it's real now.
Yeah, this is where the exaggeration and generalizing comes in. Like I'm not. Of course, I was aware that death was real, but it just hit me like a truck in that moment of in that year in particular, where I'm like, I'm going to not die at 60. Is what the major thought was. And I'm like, what leads to that? Oh, okay, so these choices. And then like I want to make friends and not enemies. So what leads to that? So like a lot of things I was realizing, oh, I'm not treating my friends that well, or I'm not doing this that well, or things that like I didn't realize I was doing based on maybe some programming from media that I was absorbing as a teen. And like music was a huge part of that. Like I was listening to Marilyn Manson, Slipknot, and I watched Terminator 2 when I was 5, like all this stuff that
Dude, Terminator 2 so good.
Did I need to be desensitized to death?
Terminator 2 though, man. That's some real stuff. Come on,
so that's
Terminator 2 arcade machine back there. Come on,
I assume that like if as long as you didn't get into drugs or murder anybody,
because of
then
Terminator.
you were doing things right. No, I meant in general. Like if you didn't get into drugs and you didn't murder anyone, then you were doing things the right way. I thought that everything.
I didn't murder anyone.
You
by
didn't?
The way.
Not yet. No, I'm just kidding.
Jesus
Christ.
Murder.
Matt, now you're throwing out blasphemy. You get me so wound up. Like, not yet. Look at this guy. He's such an enabler.
Yeah. So we are now at
not yet,
the.
Not yet. Wait.
We're in the final segment now. We're still workshopping a name. What did we say? It's like a palate cleanser, but like what was the name that we had decided?
We were talking about like the lunch break kind of thing because it's a lounge lunch or the triangle.
Yeah.
You know, like we could have a little triangle.
Oh, holy crap! Quitting time.
Yeah, quitting time.
It's quitting time because like the bell and you hear the bell. So like I do need to work on some sound effects because that could be fun.
We'll just steal Dick Doug sound effects.
Yeah, we'll just steal them all.
Figure it all out anyway.
So like.
She froze. Possibly. Nope, you're back.
Still here. But to sort of like do like interesting to do the time for the decaf. Yeah, that'd be good too. We can restart our camera.
Love it. You gotta love this stuff, guys.
So music has become silly.
Music has become silly.
It has.
Okay, this. How so?
We now have songs that are actually really entertaining to listen to, that are completely based around internet memes.
Yep, it's true.
That are catchy. They are invading our society. My girlfriend's son is like telling me about them. You have to hear this song. This is a really cool song.
Yeah, it's fun for a minute, right? Probably loving it.
But it's like when we were kids, we would listen to, say, the Beatles, or we'd listen to like something our parents would show us, right? And we'd be like, this is awesome. And then now these kids are growing up in this time, listening to like a meme-based song, and they're going to grow up to be our age. And when they are 30, 35, 40, right, they are going to be like, oh man, I used to listen to that all the time. That song is a classic. And it's like the Crazy Frog or something, you know? And it's fascinating. Huh? What does the fox say? Exactly.
And now you're figuring out ways to capitalize on the younger generation and get rich.
But that's what everything does, right? Look at vape companies that are flavoring things bubblegum and candy flavored, right? Everything is about getting to them younger and younger.
Yeah.
And music is the same in some respects. I will give you hope. Are you ready for hope for the future?
Well, we need the hope. That's what this segment's about. So yeah, yes, please.
So 7th and 8th graders who talk about Queen and Boston and Journey.
Nice.
And bands like Styx and America and Metallica, Led Zeppelin. These kids know like 80s, 70s. I have some kids who like were raised. I'm talking an 8th grader right now who was raised on original, like the birth of rap. Right?
Wow.
Nice.
I have an 8th grader who's a huge fan of like 90s, 2000s emo punk. Is like all about the Green Day.
Yeah.
And all about like the Miss May I and like those kinds of bands.
May I interject?
Hope for the future is that will continue.
Yeah. Well, may I interject a little bit? I was actually kind of expressing these new forms of music as not necessarily a bad thing, though. Like some of them aren't, like I don't like them, but if that kid's like rocking out to this song and enjoying it, by all means. And I'm just more talking about the enigma of when I'm old and gray and there's this kid like, man, like there's this like 30-year-old talking to me like, man, I miss Crazy Frog. That was the best song. I'd be like, what? Like from my perspective, but from his, that's a core memory now. You know?
I always thought it was funny, the idea of just in that context, any generation as they age, especially respective to you, seeing a bunch of there will be a time if we live long enough where some 80-year-old man could bring out a record of Dre's coming straight out of Compton and play it, you know, and that's the thing. To think of an old man doing that, to think of your grandfather doing that's pretty funny. But eventually we're gonna get old and it shifts and it's gonna seem old to them. Like
Cotton Eye Joe. Chozo in the chat brings up Cotton Eye Joe, for instance.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to diminish what you were saying though either, Alyssa. That wasn't my intention. That's also very awesome when a little kid or a younger kid is really digging like some Boston or some Journey or you know, I love that too.
Kids in Spencer's were looking at like old metal art, like t-shirts, and I go, oh my god, the metal art guys, like my uncles and stuff, they all inspired me. That's where all my aesthetic comes from. I'm like, oh my god, people are going to start like going towards that just because of that. And it's interesting to see how people do gravitate towards music and time period.
The hamster dance.
One thing I will say to what you said, Alyssa, was you do get, I think everything, I'm convinced everything is like balanced. Like the world just exists in balance. And for every kid you're talking about, Matt, that's like gonna listen to some stupid kind of thing for just humor and fun and not really be invested in music, seeing it as a kind of a entertainment or a novelty, you'll have that other kid right beside them who's like, I wanna know more. I want to understand history and how it can like help me in musical pursuits.
There's a handful of songs that I still listen to that I listened to when I was just coming out of high school that like they're based on a video game. It's like some band that decided they were going to sing about their favorite video game, and separate from the video game, it's actually a really great song. And then to think about, wow, without this game, this song wouldn't exist. And like
because
now
they use video games to sell music now because kids don't listen to the radio.
What?
Yeah.
They use video games to sell music because kids don't listen to the radio.
I mean, that's
how they say it.
That's true. I mean, I don't know if that's what this band was intending.
Probably.
But like, I know it's like it's probably was like a YouTube like, oh, we're gonna sing about this game, and people who are looking up videos for this game are now going to find our song through YouTube. So yeah, similarly, yeah.
I think there are pros and cons to everything. I think all said and done, everything we've talked about is why you should support your local music teacher.
Oh, 100%. Yep.
Music is an outlet for kids. It's a place for all of us to find health, to find therapy, to find a place. Like nobody is left out of music. There's all like blues, jazz, rock, metal, punk, steampunk, classical, avant-garde classical. There is no limit to the music. And I think the biggest thing is that if we have teachers who are out there giving kids opportunities to dive deep, into some of these things, I think that will allow them to expand their own knowledge and their own liking. My big concern for the future is running out of like not having records or having
physical media,
losing documentation of some of the music that's coming out. You can find records and recordings of Elvis and the Beatles. You can find, if you're lucky, you can find those Edison. So Thomas Edison made a music player. It's basically an early version of a phonograph, right? And it's a tiny little scroll. They look like these tiny little
scrolls.
Pans.
I've seen those. Yeah.
And what it would do is it's a music player, and it would read. It's a cylindrical record, and all the rivets are in this can.
That was the first. You know how like programs like Fruity Loops, the way you set up the notes in the program.
Kinda.
Where it's like that's what those cylinders kind of look like. So it was like the original digital media. It's like the first version of digital music because it's based on like those tick marks.
Right, but like it's like a
loose,
record,
very loosely.
Right? So it's more like rather than tick marks, it's rivets, and the rivets have the sound waves in them. And we have those, and they still play on Edison machines.
They still work.
And they still work. They do, and it's absolutely incredible to hear that recording because it's like the first time you hear a record and you hear the
Oh my God, I would love to. I
background.
would love to witness a conversation between a kid who is playing music on a record player, and then his great grandfather's like, "That doesn't sound good at all. You should listen to this thing." It's like one of these Edison things, right?
Right? But like think about the future. What
Yeah.
comes next? So we've moved from
Oh,
records,
I'm so
8
glad.
tracks, cassette tapes, CDs,
Mm.
MP3 players, iPods, Apple Music,
I'm so
Spotify,
yeah.
Pandora, digital music that you have for the low price of $19.99
Yeah.
ad free.
Yeah.
You know, you get
So,
all of this music at your fingertips, or the kids who
so
just
much.
use YouTube.
So
Right?
much music.
What happens
Yeah.
to that? Where does it go?
So that's a really great question.
One good
We're
thing is that we are getting into repressing of some of this stuff and like
so
collector's item
yeah.
stuff. So most of the stuff that is a lot, well, not a part of the stuff that's out there are physical copies being made. So if, say, the internet did go down, there's a chance that there
Yeah.
are physical records of bands today. Because I've wondered that too. Like, what if it all
So
fries? And where is it all?
it's the same
I'm sure.
as. Oh my God! Sorry, finish your thought. I didn't mean to
Go
interrupt.
ahead. You're good.
We're like you ask about the future, and I consider myself an amateur futurist because I don't know enough actual science to really like know for sure. But in my novel that I'm working on, there is a scene where they go into a nightclub, and there's a band playing, and the band is using instruments that are not, you can't see the instrument, but they're wearing these specialized gloves that read your finger movements. And then there's one guy who it does have a guitar, but it's called a spherical guitar. And there's a magnetic ball floating in the middle of where the guitar strings normally would be. And he's manipulating that ball to create the sounds that he wants to make. And that was just sort of my idea of like futuristic instruments. But when it comes to the future of music, I love what CP touched on because now we have access to so much music that we're going to see a comeback of the collector's item. Going to see a band live is going to become even more valuable because you could just access it anywhere. And like, why would I ever go out and buy a CD if I could access it anywhere? I consider myself a bit of a dinosaur with this. Is that if I really love an album, I will buy the CD to listen to in my car. And if I really love an album enough, I'll buy the record just to have it. And then there's another aspect that I wanted to touch on that Abso actually brought up that reminded me of TikTok being a place for emerging artists to become popular without the need for a record label. And that is the most important thing that's been happening lately to me. I hate record labels. I hate what they do to artists. There are some good ones out there, don't get me wrong, but there are way more bad than good, it seems. And the fact that an artist can make it their life, create music completely on their own is beautiful to me. And there's one song in particular that I do want, as we don't have to listen to it right now, but sort of to wrap up the podcast, I want to listen to this song. It won't get recorded in the recording. So I'll still have to ask for permission from the artist to include it in the final recording, but to listen to it live, we can. And I'll just give you a Spotify link to it. But the thing, this artist in particular, he made one song, right? He wasn't even really planning on being like a big musician, right? And he's now getting invited to Denmark to open for a band, right? And he's getting this. He actually has 2 platinum like things. Well, I can't remember what they're called. They're like however many plays on Spotify, and they send you a thing, right? And now he has that, and it was all because of just one song that he made and threw up. And he's like, I'm gonna do it. Like this is my thing now. And the song speaks to me because I love space. So it's about things about it's a kind of like a love ballad, singing about sort of like if I went to Mars.
Well, you can't just accept that he's a one-hit wonder. So many people before.
Well,
the expectation of poor people. It's like, you take the.
oh, it's okay. Sorry,
hmm?
I have terrible memory, so I wanted to make sure I looked up. It's called "Runaway to Mars."
Okay.
By Talk. And I found him on TikTok, and I would never have known about the song without that. That's in my
selling you the music.
Yeah, in my opinion, that's well. The thing is, like these emerging artists have found success with TikTok, and now you do see big companies jumping on the platform and then doing exactly what you're saying, CP, and like now they're trying to recreate that.
And Absol's talking about something too. So not only is there like this physical media coming back, especially like Zoomer kids are like getting more and more into physical stuff because they just never had it. So it's romantic, the idea of like not having everything all at once and just having a thing and having a physical thing. So I've done a lot of artwork. I've repurposed old cassette tapes and things, and you make art because they have a resonance with people. It's like, oh, this reminds me of this thing, and then you add a piece of art to it, and it connects together. But presenting these things, old media to like children, it's funny. It's just so cute watching parents and what is this? And the cassette tape they'll put on their face like it's a mask, and they don't even know, but it's this new experience. And it's cool to see people experience things new and to understand like you don't just press a button, you have to rewind the tape and the clunkiness of it, and it is romantic to a lot of people now. I'm starting to see, and so that's good. And also there's a big trend I'm seeing a lot more in like the East, working with traditional instruments again, or inventing new styles of instruments and creating music that's more contemporary sounding. But say like there's bands that do stuff that sounds a lot like electronic music, but it's done with all traditional instruments. You take like I'm thinking of the band The Who right now, not like the HOW, the HU. They're a Mongolian band, and they do like rockabilly music, but there's a lot of like throat singing and different types of traditional instruments that change it up, and then they invent things, and then also seeing people compose stuff with trash and different things. So the physicality
That reminds me.
Move away, but it always kind of moves back to physical too, because I think humans are physical in nature, and how long can we not have this stuff physical? How can we not exist in music?
We
no way.
I do want to ask Alyssa a question. I want to ask both of you this. So before we get too far away from it, what do you guys think? Like, there's no way to be sure because we could do as much archaeology as we want, and we'd never be 100% sure. When did it start? Like, what do you think? What do you think was the first time someone went, I can make sound with my belly, or I can make, oh my god, this is a noise. Oh, this is kind of catchy. I'm gonna actually put words to this. And then like, was it like the Unga Bunga, like caveman sounds, right? Or was it when we invented language, was around the time when they actually started to form songs? Like, Alyssa, you may actually have some education background that actually has more to add to this.
All right, I have answers.
I wanted to ask this before I got too far from it.
Isn't it one of those easy answers, right?
It's an easy answer. It's beautiful, actually. And the thing is, it's evolving. Because as archaeology grows and continues, things become found. So music is one of those things that we don't have documentation of past, like the medieval time period. Because the medieval time period, it's like antiquity to the 1400s, is like classical music history birth, right? Classical music, what we would consider like European traditional music that we know today, right? So that time period. I have a cat, and she's adorable, and I just look at her. She's just
the face.
Dude, I need to be able to hug my cat like that.
That I'm being.
That's the.
What do you
oh my baby.
That cat to get it so nice.
That's the I'm being lifted face.
What are you doing to me, mother? Why? So what we consider Western classical music doesn't really have like a birth date, but it starts in churches in Europe with monks and monasteries and abbeys. And people like Hildegard von Brünn, who's actually our first female composer who wrote music for her abbey. It was, you should look up early recordings of it. It's pretty cool to hear it. There are people who study it and are performing in what they believe is the style. So classical music starts then, right? As you start digging back further, you start going into different cultures, and different cultures have their own start, right? You could go back to like early Hebrew times where they had the shofar, which is a ram's horn they would use to march into war, or they would march. Drums. There are
very true,
like in China had drums in like 6000 BC made out of alligator skin. And they were using it to march into war, and like
that's
so
amazing.
every culture kind of has their own. Really, really cool that I just found actually while I was doing some research on wind band. One of the first ever flutes was found caveman times, which they're dating to be about 10 to 20,000 years old, somewhere in the middle of that. It is a hollowed out bone from an animal with a hole in it. And archaeologists have like found cave drawings of these people using this instrument as a way to alert other cave people of danger. And that they would use different, the thought process is they would use different pitches and like different like numbers of like toot toot would be like, oh, I'm warning you that there is an animal and we're in danger, or toot toot toot, we're on the prowl, we're gonna go hunt this animal. So super cool history about music. I would say that once we started like fire and tools starting to be were created in storytelling and cave paintings were starting, my like thoughts would be that music would be around the same time. They would start like trying to tell stories with rhythm and pitch, and they would start humming. But some of the earliest instruments we have are flutes and drums. And then eventually they evolved through the ancient Egyptians with reed flutes made out of the reeds from like the Nile River and that kind of stuff. And then eventually, as technology changed and grew, there would be the introduction of more things like trumpets, natural horns that were just literally made out of wood with holes, and there were no pistons or anything. It was just like similar to a flute, just expanded, which started the birth of trumpets and trombones. And then like years and years and years later, we're talking like 1400s, you've got like the invention of like pianos and guitars, and that's where music starts to grow. And between the 1400s and today, we have a lot of documented stuff, but we also have a lot of stuff that's undocumented. So when I was talking about it evolving, one of the coolest things that a recent archaeologist has found is that a lot of documented music we have shows that music was only happening in churches and in places where kings and queens were. So the only places that music as a Western culture started was royal courts. Kings would hire musicians to play for ceremonies, for crownings, for religious things, right? Recently, in the last 5 years, archaeologists in France have found a very, very old colony of people, an old town, and in that town they found early instruments, like early lutes and guitars, which shows us that people have been making music even in like the poorest, like country-style ancient villages, which is like really cool.
I mean, you would think that just being someone, like I grew up, I didn't have like lots of cash around, and drawing and making sound and doing things like that were pretty accessible ways to entertain yourself, and then maybe even get yourself work, and and I thought it was interesting you talked about how the early people made different sounds for like, hey, this is that, this is this, because I always figure music is just a natural thing that exists without humans, and we're trying to understand it. So the idea of this person playing a horn, it's much like, well, then they just probably copy the birds, or the birds just making those same kind of, they have certain sounds, and they do the same exact thing, like, oh, we can make the sound for this, and
That's great.
And animals have them, right? Animals have certain sounds to warn of certain things. Hey, it's mating season. Hey, there's a thing over there. Hey, danger, danger, Will Robinson, right?
Yeah.
Like they communicate with each other with sounds, and we find that humans ended up doing the same thing.
That's
Humans
funny.
invented a way to communicate distances, and I mean, there are biblical references to old drums and horns, which are really cool. There are cave paintings. Egyptian hieroglyphs show really, really cool things. I mean, not even just instruments. I mean, the Baghdad battery concept that they had electricity.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so freaking cool. So it's like humans have this nature to explore it and to find it, and I think music is a part of us. I think music is a thing that is it's one of the things that Tolkien did with Lord of the Rings that I totally resonate with. If you've read the Silmarillion is like the stories that lead up to Lord of the Rings.
I'm actually listening to that on audiobook right now.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
But like the whole opening talks about these beings, these like giant godlike beings, and how they're all just hanging out together making music. And like music is the essence of life. It's like so I was like, yes, Tolkien, you got it. It is so true. I mean, black holes have a hum. Space has a hum.
Yep. And then if you want to go even deeper, there's even more evidence for string theory that just came through. And it seems like the entire universe might be based entirely on frequencies and reverberations and vibrations of these strings at the subatomic level. Which
I think we today, I think we take for granted the accessibility we have to some of these things, because when you look back in history, one of the things that we've been talking about over the last like 4 or 5 years is the inclusion of all people's music. And like there's this really beautiful example in Mozart's time. There was a violin player, Joseph Boulanger. Boulanger. This is what they called him for a long time. I'm just gonna say it, and it's not what we would deem politically correct. He was considered at the time the Black Mozart. His father was French. His mother was Caribbean. He was a bastard child of this guy, and this guy took him to France and got him trained. He was known as the Chevalier du Saint George, and he was a world-class fencer, and he was a world-class violin player. And eventually, Beethoven and Mozart would write violin parts specifically for him, and he composed music. We do not have lots of his music, which is super sad because he's amazing. Or Marian Martinez, who was Mozart's equal, a piano player who wrote symphonies, and she was whatever Mozart would play forehand piano stuff, she was his duet partner. But because she was a woman, and oftentimes in this time period, women, people of color, weren't allowed in the classical music world, we are rewriting music history today to find those people, because there is evidence and it does exist. And someone goes up to their attic in Austria and like rips out this piece and goes, oh my God, this is a piece by Marian Martinez. And then we look at it, we study it, and it's like, it's amazing. So music is evolving and is including all of these other like realms and routes that it was created and moved through during its time period of like classical music. But then you start looking at I'm just like tangenting, I'm just going. But then you start looking at like world music, and world music is wild. Each culture has its own history. Each culture has their own instruments. One of my favorite pieces of world music, it's called gamelan music, and it's from Indonesia. And these people hand make their instruments and pass them down to their children, and they play music for ceremonies and all of these kinds of things. And now today, these people perform as a like showcase of cultural music from Indonesia. And there are drums and there are these bells, and it is a wildly cool sounding piece of music. China has their own sets of music with their own instruments, like the erhu, a 2-string violin-like upright instrument that has snakeskin on the bottom, and it's beautiful. Like when you walk into a Chinese restaurant and you probably hear that and a Chinese zither. Those are like the 2 main instruments that we hear today. But they have orchestras full of people playing zithers and erhus, and it's beautiful. Or you go to South Africa, and in South Africa, people were hollowing out gourds to make these really cool like string and drum instruments. So it's hard to kind of catch it all, but every culture, if you wanted to really deep dive into some of this, you could pick a culture and you could just go. And there's so much evidence, and there's people still making it today. They pass it on from generation to generation to generation of how to make these instruments, how to play them. And it's a really beautiful thing. I actually just watched a documentary on how to make bagpipes. And in Scotland today is one of the last trade-made Scottish bagpipe place in Edinburgh. And they like from family, they pass it down, and like you get an apprentice, and the apprentice learns, and then they teach an apprentice, and you're down to like the last shop in Scotland that hand makes them the way that they used to. It's wild. Yep. Mm-hmm. No, and it's all hand carved. It's all of the sound pipes, the pipes that come out, they put it on a wheel, and as the wheel is spinning, you carve it out, and you can mass produce anything with factories today, but the fact that there are people who still do it is amazing.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me that there's places that don't. It's weird to me that they don't do it the way that they used to, because when you want it to sound authentic, but then as I think that, I'm realizing that, oh wait, guitars are now. Guitars aren't made the way that they were used to unless it's like a very skilled carpenter. Like you wouldn't have that skill.
Or like fun fact, ukuleles are from Portugal. They're not from Hawaii.
What?
Yep. Isn't that fun? So ukuleles were
sociological stuff.
Portuguese adventurers were off exploring, made it to Hawaii, and the people of Hawaii were like, "Huh, this is cool. We could do something with this," and they took it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, if you don't know this, that's fine. But I assume that you do. What is a original instrument from Hawaii then, if not the ukulele?
I don't know.
I know it's a very specific question.
You know what you'd have to do? You'd have to do some like human ancestry tracing, because people from Hawaii didn't just pop up. They like they came from islands. They're island people who traveled and landed there. So I would say it could be from like the Philippines or Indonesia, or like some of those South Pacific island people who like early Americans who made their way out east, I guess, and they found Hawaii.
They also had a gourd instrument, apparently. A kaiki, I think. I'm not sure what that is. The Ohihano Paihu. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. The Pahu. And there's one that says it's the Yukiki, but I don't know if the Yukiki is a ukulele or if it's something different, like the pre-ukulele or something.
It could be. I mean, technically every instrument comes from somewhere, and if they're all, the modern guitar came from lutes and Spanish guitars, which is where you get like acoustic guitars, which then in the 50s became electric guitars and electric bass. Like the 1950s, electric guitar was invented. So like 1940s, but that's like,
oh my
some
God,
instruments are super old and all come from something else.
What was that first thought of, man, I really like this guitar, but it's just not loud enough.
Can I do this, right? What was that thought? To like, I'm gonna add this weird pan-looking thing to it and pickups, and we're gonna plug it into this funny little thing over here, and we're gonna rip.
Yeah, I love that, the idea of like, oh, someone had to think of this and make it, and then now oh man, I totally forgot to include this in what I said about the band in my novel, the thing that like playing in the air with their fingers. Someone made this. That was the main point to me, saying that someone made an app for your phone that hooks up to this device you wear, and you can make music depending on how your fingers are moving and what your hands are doing, what position your arm is in, it changes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's like Shark? Didn't they like produce it on the Sharks, or they like brought it to the Sharks? I thought
It
saw
was
a clip of that.
it was on Shark Tank, yes.
Yes.
And I don't know what came of that. That was the last I saw of it.
Side note about an instrument. Long time ago. No, long time ago. I mean like 2000s.
Yeah.
Someone really loved the harp and really loved the theremin and decided to make an instrument called the laser harp with video game consoles. Put it together and put all these lasers out, and each laser is a pitch. And they performed the Tetris theme at this laser harp competition.
We've come full circle. So, the Tetris theme. We're back to Soviet Russia.
So like the Game Boy, the original Game Boy is coveted because it has a specific sound chip in it that the other ones didn't have, and then DJs collect those and then hack into them and then make chiptune music out of them. Cool. I've seen people rip apart game consoles, like take a Sega Genesis and build guitars out of it. I mean, there's just like wild engineering stuff that nerds like to do. When it becomes a cultural thing too, I think, because like there's different ways to experience anything, and music's probably one of the most open-ended. Like, how do you experience music? Maybe you like to make gadgets and you're kind of a logic scientisty kind of guy, or you just like the expression, or humming in nature and don't like any of the technicalities of it. It always fascinates me how people approach music, because there's not really a wrong to go about it.
I mean, you could look at some avant-garde composers. I would say like mid to late 20th century composers, like
Philip Glass.
Stephen Reich, Philip Glass with Koyaanisqatsi, and one of my favorites is this piece called Water Walk. Okay. And it's written by John Cage, and it's all of this different type of stuff that requires water, and all he does is just like he hits it. There's a video of him performing it, and it's so funny because the audience is like dying laughing as he like starts a blender and like takes a cup of water and like pours it into a tub and then puts it down, and it's like ridiculous, but he's challenging music. He's challenging what we call music, and there are people who want to not worry about the technical, skillful side, who wants to just go and make a little yurt and hum in nature and be a part of the vibrations of the rocks and the earth and the spin and the movement. Great. And for the people who are really technical and are like, I'm going to go to Juilliard or Berkeley and I'm going to take this classical instrument, I'm going to study that. Or the people who are like, I just want to jam, man, and are into like that acid trip music, who just like, there is any route for anyone to find anything.
So I actually brought up Water Walk.
It's funny to watch. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I don't know about my permissions to share this on stream, so I'm just gonna give everybody the link. If you want to check that out, that looks really interesting.
It's so funny.
Didn't he do a piece too where it was like it was silent and it was more about the cars going by outside?
422.
That's it. That's
433. 433. It's 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence, and there's 3 movements, and each movement he starts a clock. The conductor sits in front of a full orchestra, and he sits there, he starts a timer and puts his hands up like he's going to conduct, and he just sits there, and it's silent. And then at the end of the time that he has, he stops and he takes a break, and then you hear all the orchestra moves and they turn a page, and then he goes back and he does it again. And the idea is that the cars going by, if it's an outdoor concert, and the birds chirping and the wind and the sound, or there's this beautiful thing. Silence is a sound, and it's hard for my students to understand. And I tell them all the time, I'm like,
oh my God.
I'm like, because without silence, you wouldn't have it.
Oh my God.
If you sit in dead silence in a room full of people for 5 minutes,
sucks.
There's a feeling you get.
I hate it.
And you can hear some things.
I hate it so much.
Yeah, you can feel people who are uncomfortable. You can feel them squirming.
Yeah.
You can feel people who are about to fall asleep.
It's
a really unique thing.
There's this concept I was trying to explain to my girlfriend the other day. The silence is deafening. She's like, why do we always have to listen to music when we're doing anything? I'm like, because the silence is deafening. I can't handle the feeling. I hate that feeling. And it got so, like, that was so prevalent in my brain that I couldn't do math. I couldn't do writing. I couldn't do anything unless there was some music playing. And I even got it added to my IEP growing up that I was allowed to listen to music in certain classes on my headphones. And that was before they really understood ADHD, and I now understand that it's actually a symptom of it, where the silence is even worse for people with ADHD. So we're at time now. I would like to listen to this song as the wrap up, but if you guys have any closing thoughts, basically I want you to answer a question of what does music mean to you, and what would you do if you didn't have it? If there was no, if say you were like, let's go like even more metaphysical with it. Say you were a creature that didn't have hearing, that you couldn't actually experience music in the same way we do now.
I think I already figured it out, so I can go.
Then you can answer first.
Yeah. So it's kind of easy. Like I always try to go for the easiest answer first and elaborate.
Yeah.
So the question is, what would I be? I would feel that I'm not connected enough to the natural. I don't think I would be as connected to the natural world in my emotional capacity without music. I think if I didn't have that, there would be a big disconnect.
Like we'd be missing a layer to reality, and you'd have that constant wondering of like, there's more to this, but I just don't have the capability to experience it.
That being said, there's also a side of music that is disconnecting from nature. So if I was to say that the music didn't exist, I think it's impossible. I think human creation of music, maybe say that didn't exist, that would be different. But I think it exists beyond us, like I was saying with the birds and the sounds. So I would hear it even if it wasn't recorded. And I think if I only heard the sounds of nature, I'd know when the storms are coming, like the birds, when they when they all fly away, and you're like, oh, where are they going? And then all of a sudden it starts to rain. It's because they're attuned to a sound and a frequency that I'm not, because I'm too busy listening to something that humanity created to distract me away from truth.
Made me kind of realize that I could pose the question in a whole different way. So we can't see every wavelength of light, right? So if a race of aliens existed that couldn't experience sound the way we do, but they eventually invented machines that could pick it up, and like they could interpret it in some way, they'd see it as waves, they'd see it as we do now, but they wouldn't hear it in its natural form. They'd have to convert it into a sensory experience that they could understand, like visual or smell or anything. Like, could you imagine, for instance, we were talking about Lady Gaga, what would Bad Romance be as a smell? What would it be as a purely visual, no sound? Oh, your face as a smell. That said it all. That'd be stinky. Maybe. But it'd be based on how it made them feel though, so I wonder if it would stink. Oh man, what a dancey song. Smells sweet.
I mean, it depends if what you said you were listening to too, and you talked about having ADHD.
Yeah.
You know, I got diagnosed late in life. You know, a couple years ago, so I'm still playing the figure out game. But I did realize that I had a weird connection to music where it was just like fragments and pieces, and I couldn't get the feel of a whole thing down, but I could tell you all the small little silly parts that no one ever listened to in the background. And that was always my gift. But it got a little bit more tighter and tighter as the years went on. Of course, I understood music, but the thing is, I started understanding lyrics. I never listened to the message of what people would say in song. I would
Oh,
just it was a lot of feel or maybe part of it. You know, I'd grab a part of it, but yeah, I wouldn't really be breaking down it as poetry so much, which I also like. But I separated the two, you know, and I've started to bring those two things together. So it's interesting experience, but yeah, there's we're
so
saying music so interpreted based on brain, and if we're aliens. I'm just trying to figure out what alien
yeah,
music sounds like. I know we make our own human version
yeah,
of it, but if it's all based on frequency, it's got to be pretty similar. I mean, but just
maybe
probably different ways to present it.
all rhythm. Like there's so much. Like Alyssa, what? Now that we've kind of answered, what do you think?
For me, what is music, right? Music,
Yeah,
I mean, first of all, it's my livelihood,
yeah,
right? I get to experience adolescents growing through the creation of music every day, which is like really cool to see them come into their own on their own instrument and to see them find success and to see them find music that they love and share it with me and with their
still.
peers and with other teachers and their family. Um, music is music is a communication tool that connects all of us, no matter our race, our religion, our color, our language. Music is the connector between everything, between life, between love and happiness and sadness and grief, and it takes feelings that are fleeting and converts them into emotion, deep-seated rooted emotion. So music is like really powerful and it means a lot to me, not only as someone who's grown up doing music my whole life, but someone who continues to perform, continues to play, encourages other people to play and find their niche and like their thing that gives them an outlet. Now to the second question of if I was an alien and didn't hear music or wasn't like a conventional way of music, it's really, really hard to give an answer to that, because of the paradigm that we currently live in, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah, it's
the paradigm
exactly.
would be like
Yeah.
I literally had this thought last night. There was this movie that came out that was about a girl who went out to be like to music school from a deaf family, but she wasn't deaf and she could sing. I can't remember what the movie's called. Coda, I think. And she, like, her parents are deaf, and the video clip I saw is like her performing. The piano is playing and she's singing, and her parents are in the audience, and she's signing. And I had a moment of like, what would that be like for me to lose all sense of my hearing and to watch someone perform and see the piano keys move, but to not hear it? For someone who's heard my whole life, I can't tell you. I don't know. Like, if I lost my hearing tomorrow, um, that would be really difficult because I would try to recreate the things that I know. But if I've never known it, right? If we go back to the beginning, conventional, like traditional way that we hear it as humans, I don't know if we would be missing out. I don't
Yeah.
know if we wouldn't know any better. And maybe we would try to make it like the way that you're talking about different light waves, right? Maybe
Yeah.
a society of people who don't hear would go, oh, there's this wave and there's this vibration I feel it in my hands, this thing is vibrating,
Yeah.
what is that? And then you can try to recreate it in different waves and formats, and you can say, oh, that wave is shorter, that wave is bigger, what does that mean? But that doesn't change that I can't see the light, right? It wouldn't change that my eyes can't see it. I
Yeah.
can't interpret it as I'm walking around. So, if
I
I never knew, I don't think I would know the difference. But
yeah, I love
if I
answers
lost
like
my
that.
hearing tomorrow, it would be a very sad day.
That's
And
true.
I hope that my memory of sound would be strong enough to continue hearing things internally. I
Oh,
recently found out. I guess there are people who don't have inner monologues.
yeah,
They
that's
can't hear a
What?
voice in their head.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's people that they don't talk to themselves in their head. It's all their thoughts are fairly instantaneous and they just sort
What?
of, and there's
Yep,
some people
right.
it's just images. It's just images. Like
Okay.
and then they have to interpret the image in their head to explain what they're trying to say to someone or to like their coworkers. They're trying to design something. They don't have the monologue. Like I have the image and monologue, so I get like so I explain it to myself and then I have to re-explain it.
That's so
Yeah.
weird. I have a whole
Right.
friggin' council in this head. It has to go through
Right?
all the
Yeah, it's
channels.
a council.
There's
Yep.
like so many
And I
people
can
that
hear
has
things. Right? So like in my head, I'm working on a show right now, and the show that I'm in, I can like sing through the part until I come in, and then I can sing my part, and I know that my part is in pitch because I've heard it enough that my brain has captured all the images and all the like sound waves of all of the pitches and all the music. I can hear the clarinet come in, I can hear the saxophone, I know where the violin parts are. So I would hope that if I went deaf, my recognition of those things would stay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mozart, right? And well, it's a Beethoven, right?
So I do want to sorry, go ahead, CP.
I was just saying, like, if you did have a connection before, there's a muscle memory, there's a resonance to the instruments, but there's the resonance to the keys too, and the vibration of sound. And when you go to a loud concert, when things are amplified, you feel the whole wave of things through your body. And I'm sure with the right amplification, yeah, you could connect to those frequencies, even if you lost the ear. You'd think maybe it might heighten a little bit the feel of it.
You
You
like
have to,
feel the
retrain your
vibrations
brain
better.
to feel the vibrations of the pitches.
Yeah.
Which is what Beethoven did. He cut the front legs of his piano off, so as he was trying to compose the thing in his head, he could match the frequencies to what was being played. So it would vibrate through the floor into his feet or into his body, and he's like, "Yep, that's right." He also had a lot of like people who wrote for him to like adjust and like edit.
So based on the previous question, just as food for thought, like I don't think there's actually an answer to this question, but it's just some food for thought. Like that race of aliens that only feels vibrations, they start writing their own vibrations and creating music essentially. But then we take those vibrations and we create music that we can hear. Say we meet these aliens, and then their music could either sound really strange or be like effortlessly beautiful because they're basing it on feeling instead of sound. That would be it's just food for thought. I don't think it's really a question. But let's see. I think I've asked all the questions I can think of. We're at the length of time now that I kind of want to keep it. I want to keep it like under 2 hours. It's gonna be editing, of course. But Alyssa, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on and talking to us about your chosen profession. I think you said earlier that you're not an expert, but to us, you are.
Well,
you definitely know stuff.
Yeah.
Anytime. Like this is like my passion. It's something that I really love a lot, and like just talking about it with people is a lot of fun. And to hear other people's backgrounds and stories and the parts of music. I mean, we went off into that film tangent for a while, but like music in movies is cool and awesome, and seeing what makes people get excited and passionate about different music projects, whether it's something you've listened to or you participated in or you found later in life. Like music is really cool, and it's a lot of fun to talk about. So anytime. This was a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I had a really good time. Thanks for all that information. You got my brain going, which is good.